Good afternoon, everyone. So we're here for the Interact 2021 Revolutionizing HR Operations at Hartford HealthCare with PeopleSoft eForms. Thanks again for joining. So today with me, I have solution architect from Gideon Taylor, Lynette Showden, and I am the director of the Employee and Colleague Service Center at Hartford HealthCare, Steve Maiano. Our session overview today, and thanks, Tom. We'll cover some foundational items. I'll also touch on the why. We'll see it through a demo, and then we'll talk a little bit about the value and jump into Q&A. So, who is Hartford HealthCare? We're an integrated healthcare system, over 33,000 colleagues. We have 4,000 providers within that number. And we've been in operation for well over 100 years and continue to grow pretty aggressively within Connecticut and some of our surrounding states now. We are on the Oracle PeopleSoft platform for now 7.5 years. We went live in January of 2014, and our version is 9.2. The human capital management is on image 35 and People Tools 8.58, and that's effective as of 2 days ago. And we're getting some great feedback on the new look and feel and features there. And our finance and supply chain is on image 34, People Tools 8.57. So our journey, we joined Oracle in our ERP journey in January of 2014. At that time, we were also forming our system support office for our organization. So we had our fair share of chaos during that time. But we have continued to stabilize and really leverage the Oracle platform to deliver an exceptional experience. So in 2015 and 16, we began initiating the transition to electronic forms. It was more of a PDF version. The forms are static and stagnant, meaning that every time a user would open up the form was blank and they would have to start from scratch. We began piloting the Fluid technology in 2016 for our company organizational chart and address updates. That was our first rollout. And I would highly recommend the Fluid technology. It's been a great foundational strategy for our organization. And then in 2017 and through 2020, we started to evolve more with the Fluid features. And we began offering additional self-service features and building that technology out. And at the same time, we started searching for some additional technologies that would further deliver that value to our customers. And that search brought us to our discussion today when we met up with our current process, I'll call our process change partner, Gideon Taylor. So why Gideon Taylor eForms? We were looking to completely disrupt and revolutionize the way we capture information across our system. We needed something that was easier and scalable. The tool is completely intuitive. We absolutely love it. The scalability for us was not just within the HCM space, but we needed to also find a partner that would allow us to leverage in other areas like finance and supply chain. So some of the key benefits here, it positions the information of the existing data on the screen. Again, I mentioned our tools. Before we went live, we're all static, so people had to fill out from scratch, from employee number to all the information they needed to provide to us for processing in the system. Extremely intuitive. Continues to be mobile ready, which is great for us. We're looking for flexibility to give back to our managers so they don't need to be in front of a desktop or a laptop all of the time. And I absolutely love the workflow capability. It's saving us time on emails, and that's been one of the whys for us. It has a very solid audit process and protocols that have been built into the system. So that's on the HCM side, and we'll talk a little bit more about the finance supply chain, but they are currently building out their first eForm, and they're in development as we speak. So transforming our processes, our project scope was really laser focused on a form that we call the Employee Status Change Form, or the ESF. This was our job changes form, and this was a pretty complex form. It was a 2-page form that encompassed all types of changes that our customers could send in. When we first went live in 2014, we had paper forms. We had probably 3 or 4 at least. Over time, we consolidated all that into one form. But as you can imagine, it added to some complexity and confusion for our users. On the preparation side, over the years, we continue to do data cleansing. That process never really stops. We challenged our processes and some of our policies, and we've been doing that ongoing, and that's part of our culture here. But it over time allows us to make some of these drastic changes to deliver better services, because we're not afraid of challenging our status quo. And our design and modeling structure options. So the experience and the look and feel was something that we did spend a lot of time on thinking about as we prepared our transformation process. So from a project timeline perspective, from kickoff to initial implementation and go live was about a 4-month process. I can tell you that Hartford HealthCare was probably responsible for an extra 3 or 4 weeks in that 4-month span, simply because we made the decision intentionally to provide some additional testing. Some of our project team members had some complex transactions in there, and they wanted to run through some additional scenarios. So I think our initial was probably 3 months. We went with 4 months. We're extremely happy that we did, and it's been just an excellent product to roll out.
And I think the other thing to point out there, Steve, is you might notice that's right when Thanksgiving hits and Christmas hits. So we also had some time off there in the mix, as well as we were going through and balancing that timeline as well. Wanted to talk a little bit about the product methodology and how we went about identifying what the scope of the project was, what success would look like when we were finished with the project, and kind of our overall flow and what we did. One thing I'll say for the Hartford team is they had all of the right people in the room, and they were empowered to make decisions in that room. So as we were going through and we were talking through, do we want to do this or that? Steve and his team were able to make those decisions quickly, and they stuck throughout the project. They also had a small team, so it was really Steve and one of his team members that really knows all the details of the processes and things like that. And then we had a developer as well. So kind of a functional person and a technical person were the primary people. And then we had a few other people who kind of would flow in and out of the project as we went through. So as far as the methodology goes, we like to always kick off our projects with a discovery, where we take a look at all of the current processes. So we create a big process map, not just of what's in scope for this project, but what is going on at the organization as a whole, so that we can see, how does this form fit into that? And also, how can this business process grow over time, and start adding in additional features and things in future phases, and making sure that we're building a solution that adds that ability to easily scale up and add additional features. Discovery is always the time when we warn people, be prepared, get really uncomfortable. Change is awesome. It can also be a challenge as well. And so, we kind of hit that on the project where we had made a bunch of decisions and we were headed in a direction, and then it was like, oh, is this gonna work? And it's normal to have those feelings. And so we like to prepare ahead of time, not only for the internal teams, but also involve people externally as well, and users, and making sure they know early and often what the product will look like. From there, we go into what most people call a design phase. We've kind of picked and choose what our favorite pieces are of the agile and the waterfall. Waterfall being that you can easily define a scope ahead of time, but agile being that we don't want to spend too much time upfront going through these very complex designs. We want to get into the system, especially as a functional user, and start placing all of these fields on the pages and getting things organized so we can see it start coming together and it comes alive, and it's not just something on paper that you're trying to read. And we like to cycle through. We have 3 phases that we cycle through. So we have our first step is to really look at the fields, get the pages all laid out. And at that point, we like to talk about any updates to PeopleSoft. So, on a form like this, job data is a pretty common one to update. But we often have a bunch of other components as well that need to be updated as part of the process. So we'll tackle that first. And then we design, we develop, we model. Our modeling is our opportunity to bring everyone back in and say, hey, we're about 75% of the way on this pass. How's it looking? What do we need to change? What doesn't quite come together from what we saw on paper? And then we make those adjustments to our design, we finalize, and we move to the next phase. We add in the logic, all of the brains of the form to make things hide and show and enforce valid values. Design, develop, model, finalize through that. And then we'll move on to the workflow at the end, adding in any email notifications, our navigation, our security, kind of finishing up those last touches before we move into the migration of the form. During that design, develop, model phase for this particular project, it was about 75% functional and 25% technical. The technical pieces really being the component interfaces and those parts. And then we also had some custom views that were created to drill down and be able to define kind of those valid values based on prior selections. And we created some setup tables for the payroll team. So going forward, it was a very flexible solution that they could pull in a functional person and make changes to it easily. Once we hit migration, that's very technical heavy. And then when we got into UAT, that's where we transitioned to the client team taking the lead, and they get to start playing the role of, oh, I need to support this solution, but they have our full team paired next to them. So they get that overlap and they get to practice in that go live. And then of course we went live. For this, we did an initial pilot group. Steve and his team went on a road show about the organization and did some training and hyped up the solution a lot, some advertising. So people were all very excited about it as we wrapped up.
So challenges, simplifying our complex transactions. Our end users were challenged and even frustrated with what to select and when. And it drove to a lot of inconsistencies in what was provided that impacted our reporting and our analytics. So, one of the things, really benefits that you'll hear again came out of this was we were able to dynamically code some of those action reasons. And it's now invisible really to our end users, and our data is going to be more accurate and consistent. So that was definitely a challenge that we wanted to overcome and did. And then staffing, this happened really in the height of this pandemic. And we could have easily said, listen, we're not going to move forward. But we carved out essentially two core people, as Lynette mentioned. We had one business person and one IT person, and it was not even 100% of what they were doing. And in our meetings, we would have at least one manager and one director, even if it was only for 15 minutes at the beginning and or end of the meeting, to keep things on track. So we were able to get it done with very few resources. Strategy side, decision making. So again, we had a solid project charter and scope. Our scope was pretty clear. We took our job changes ESF form, and we said, this is the form we're looking to transfer into this new process, as much of it as we can. And my goal, really behind the scenes, maybe was to at least get 50% of our form out there in our phase one. And I'm happy to report we got 80% of it out there. And we're left with some complex transactions that we'll continue to work on over the coming months. But we're really happy that we had that set up in a very clear charter right out front. We had the right players involved. We kind of had an expectation that we wouldn't let decisions go more than 2 days. So, a lot of times in projects, we have a meeting on a Wednesday and we'll meet again the following Wednesday and continue those discussions. But I can tell you, we were at a 24 to 48 hour turnaround. We were making decisions during meetings, immediately after meetings, and we would not go into the weekend. At least it wasn't my expectation that we would let something wait from Friday until Monday if we didn't have to. So the model that we use in the strategy helped us move forward.
So I'm going to show you an example or a couple examples of the business process that was implemented. Let's see here. So it is a fluid tile. It lives on their HR Express employee homepage. They have a colleague dashboard here where they've deployed a couple different forms. And that was one thing we haven't really mentioned, is that they actually implemented two forms at the same time. So we helped them with the first one, and immediately after that, they were moving forward on their second one in parallel with us and developed that payroll form. So what we're seeing here is the fluid navigation on the left, a search page over to the right, where it's allowing people to search, and my computer is not, it made it angry. So I'll talk about a few other things until it decides to pop back up here. So the search pages are something that's configurable so that you can select the employee that you want, as well as the results. As it opens up, some of the things that were really necessary for Hartford is for things to not be so locked down. So they have a location field, and that's great if we can prompt and we know that all of the locations are in there. But oftentimes, as people are going through, then it actually turns out maybe as part of this process, they're requesting a new location or a new department or a new job code. So we needed to ensure that it was easy for people to see that process as they went through, as well as process a request for a new department or location. When the form opens up at the top, you can view the job data, the current job data for the person. And that persists throughout the form so that people can see what the current details are. And you'll also notice as we're changing things, it will highlight things in yellow. This view is as an administrator or a payroll person. So you'll see some fields that are showing that don't show for an end user. Things like the business unit default, or the business unit was selected and the company shows up over there. The payroll department wanted to see the company, but most users don't really need to see that. So it's just defaulting in. Here's where someone can select a new department, and then notifications go out, all as part of this same solution, so that that department's actually created, put into the form, and then it's finalized as it goes through the workflow process. We hid a lot of sections in here for depending on the subject or the current user that's in the form. So for this one, some people use multiple components of pay and some people use earnings distribution, but not all. So people are easily able to toggle that part on and off as they're going through the form and really make targeted changes while seeing the impacts. If there's a compensation change, they can easily see how that's impacted in the form and the flow down. One of the more complex things that we had to spend a lot of time mapping out was the effective date logic. So depending on what the actions and the reasons were in the form, it either had to be, it could be any day, it could be retro dated, or maybe retro dating wasn't allowed. It could be allowed on any Sunday, or it could only be allowed on a Sunday for the pay period begin date. It really allowed users to, based on what they changed in the form, be presented with only the options that were valid. And even a lot of the payroll team weren't necessarily familiar with all of these rules. So automated it and it locked it down. We are in as payroll, so you can see over here, the action and reason grid is showing. The next view that we see, you'll see that goes away because the end users don't really care about the action and the reason. They just want to go in and make the changes that are necessary in the system. And so now they just get to move on with their day and they don't have to hear the PeopleSoft word action and reason ever again. So once someone selects the effective date, then they still have the option to say, ooh, this falls out of that norm. I want to request a special date. And if they pick that, then they're presented and they can pick any date they want, which then routes for specific approvals for someone to either deny or accept that special date change. Attachments can be added, and then once the form is submitted, the workflow routing starts. So we're going to run through just another quick video here so you can see the difference from the employee side. So we were logged in as a payroll user in that first case. Here we're logged in as a manager that doesn't need to see all of those extra fields. So they can come in and search, they can find people based on their security. And the form opens and you notice that some of the fields along the way will be hiding and showing in some of the logic through here, but most importantly, as we get to the end, the actions and the reasons don't show up. In this one, we're going to change the business unit again and see some of the trickle down as it makes its way. You can see the department was cleared because it wasn't a valid value anymore. As we pick the location, the establishment ID is populated into the form. And in their prior version, they were having to do this all manually throughout the form. And I'm going to actually jump forward here. Okay. So then on the job code, this list is limited based on the user in the system, what they have access to, and they can pick something in the system here. And then you'll see down here when the job code is changed, we'll ask, is this a promotion? That helps us in those times where we're not quite sure the action reason. We can get pretty close, but maybe we need a little bit more information from the user. So instead of asking them to interpret the action reason, they just say, yes, this is a promotion. Well, what type of promotion is it? Here you can see the Kronos information. So those employees who needed Kronos data tracked can update it there, and then that gets pushed into the tables and records that are integrated with the Kronos system to make updates in real time. And then on this page, you're seeing back behind here, that action and reason field is not showing as well. So from our perspective, some of the big project highlights that were really big wins for Hartford was taking the time to map out that effective date logic and identify really like when people could make certain changes and trying to make that seamless for the end user. Because if the administrative team was having a hard time keeping it straight, end users were definitely doing it wrong. And in most cases, once the form made it to payroll, payroll just picked an effective date at that point. So now they can see going into it, what will this effective date be? We mentioned the ability for write-ins so that they had a way and a path, and it didn't just stop them from completing the form. And we did some parallel routing within the workflow as well, so it didn't slow down the approval processes. If you were requesting a location and a department, those could work in parallel and move the form forward. We did conditionally show those segments. So on the form prior, everyone saw Kronos setup, or everyone saw components of pay or the ability to do it. And we really targeted in and said, but who should be able to see this? And how can we simplify the form for the majority of people? Some of the fields that hide and show based on who the user is or their security role are things like the action reason, the company, the pay frequency, union code, and full-time, part-time. Because the employee services area found these fields really helpful to see, and they wanted to double check them, or as part of their processing, they just needed easy access to them. But the employee, it was kind of just cluttering up their view. And then I talked a little bit about this because it's one of the technical things we did, but we did create a setup table where it mapped the action and the reason on the form, and then they could drive workflow based on the action and reason. So it takes priority. So if there's any one of those action and reasons that requires a step, then the approval framework knows, okay, I need to stop at this step because one of the 10 action reasons requires me to. And it also drives all of those effective date rules. So whether you can backdate it or if it's a Sunday or a pay period within the system as well.
So the big wins we had, the auto calculation, or what I consider kind of the dynamic calculation of this action reason is huge. This continued to confuse folks on our paper and our PDF forms. And they may not realize it's missing, but I tell you, they never wanted to do it from the beginning. And this is really a huge win. The other win with that is that our data is a lot more consistent now from an analytics and reporting perspective. So I think we got some data cleansing and improved reporting out of that process, as well as making it easier for our customers. So truly a win-win. On the mobile ready side, so fluid technology is something that we had adopted a few years ago, but this here is also mobile ready. We're trying to give as much flexibility to our leaders as possible, and to not have them tethered to laptops and desktops, when they could possibly do that in another way, is really beneficial. And we're pushing all of our mobile technology and maybe making that more of a table stake. So it was great that that was also available for some of these key transactions that need to be completed as well. The automated workflow, it just saves time and it saves emails. We would have to continue to train people on where to send things based on the type of action reason and transaction submission. Now, on a monthly and quarterly basis, we review and send out reports on who's in that workflow. And if we have any staff changes, we will just update it in that chart and immediately tag it to that workflow. So again, that's a huge win for folks. Simplicity and ease of use. You got a quick flavor for it in the demo that Lynette went through. Those are actual real live screenshots of going through our system that we rolled out. We probably should have showed Lynette what the before looked like in our ESF form, because it is overwhelming and ugly. But this makes it so much easier. And we'll see a little bit of some of the customer feedback on the next slide. And then lastly, the videos. This was kind of not say a last minute decision, but about halfway through the project, I said, we absolutely are going to need videos on this as part of the training component. And I actually used the videos for some of our executive leadership and even some of our manager town halls, where I set up 30 minutes. The videos, they're like 3 or 4 minutes long. I think our longest video is like 9 minutes long. and it goes through a host of transactions. Everyone absolutely loved those videos. They were able to leave those sessions and immediately send in transactions. So if nothing else, consider having those videos as part of your rollout, because I continue to use them today, and we're now 3 or 4 months in. Matter of fact, just this morning, I met with a client, and they were just not sure what to do on one of the forms. We quickly went into the video. We didn't even play the whole video. We played about 2 minutes of it, and they said, "I got this." And they went off, and I haven't heard from them since, so that's good news. But definitely would push the videos. It was a great component from a training standpoint. So some testimonials from our customers. We had this customer here, one of our nurse managers. I love the simplicity of it. I can tell you I never heard that word from other processes that we've had. They would call or not call and send in things, and there'd be a lot of back and forth. So the fact that they were able to fill it out and then actually share with us their experience is really huge. This next one is from one of our medical group managers. And if you have any medical group staff within your organization, you could probably realize how happy we were to receive this, because that's a group that just seems to be challenged when it comes to technology, at least what we experience. And their feedback here was, I was never timely with changes, but you've now made this so easy. So we would constantly, when I talked about data cleansing before, I would say proportionately, the medical group always had the most challenging data to clean up, because they just didn't pay attention. They never wanted to open our forms and fill it out. It wasn't until merit time they realized that people were gone for a year, but yet they still showed up in the reports. Now that we've made it so easy and we are auditing it, and we're actually sending information to them, pushing as well as a pull feature, they now have an easy way to go in and make that change. So I guess it's a careful what you ask for scenario, but we've made it so easy that it's actually helping us with some of that data. So we get some really good feedback from our users. I know we're only about 3 or 4 months in, but it's certainly a very encouraging sign. On the metric side, as I mentioned, about 80% of our form we rolled out in phase 1. Again, phase 1 from kickoff to delivery was 4 months. And we were able to handle 80% of the form. And actually that represents almost 95% of our transactions. The ones that are left are a little more complex. They're also rare transactions. They're not kind of our heavy hitters of volume. So I think in our phase 1, it was a huge win. And we're seeing that now in some of the numbers, because we've had over 100 users log in, unique users log in and use this new eForms, and over 600 transactions. And that's, it's probably close to 700 or more, because that's about 2 weeks old. So we're really getting some traction here. And I would expect in the next couple months, we'll triple or quadruple that number. On our transactional side, our lifecycle team that's processing these items, they're actually using it as well. This was not an expectation during our charter write-up, because we're trying to make it easier for the end customer. And what we realized is we made it so easy that even our processors on the back end could continue to use this for any paper forms that do come in, or our electronic ESFs that still come in, for that extra 20% that we're working through. If someone is not adopting this and our form comes in and we see that it's a transaction that could actually be processed through the eForms, we do push it back and we say, please try this out. We're gonna pause processing this. We'd like you to try the new form. So that's how we're trying to increase adoption, and I expect our metrics to improve over time. So what's next? We will continue to leverage this in HR and some of these status changes and some other things that we can improve on. Payroll is already working on their next leg of eForms. I mentioned they rolled out some of their supplemental pay already with us, but they have more coming as well. And our finance and supply chain teams are actually working as we speak. Their ETA for rollout is around the September timeframe right now, and they're looking at some general ledger items for a chart field request. So when I talked about this being a scalable solution early on, we were looking to scale it across just the HCM platform, and we're finding that that's certainly true for us. So with that, a reminder here, and I'll check the chat, so we'll have to see if we have some items in there, but just a reminder, our session surveys, click on the session in your schedule, click session feedback. We would love the feedback, and on the general feedback home screen, and we would love to hear what you have to say, and certainly any questions. So we will open it up. So Lynette, do we have anything in our chat that we want to talk through here? I see one, I've got a meeting, someone had to leave. Does the workflow differ? This is from Karen. Does the workflow differ from the write-in fields? For example, if a new department is required, how does the form get handled versus when an existing department is selected? So Lynette, I'll take this one first, Lynette, and you could certainly add some technical expertise if I miss anything here. So on the current form, what they do is they'll put in our comments field that they needed a new department, and then behind the scenes, our transaction processors send that off to our finance teams, and they research it, create the department, let us know it's available, and then we go ahead and process and let the requester know that it's completed. In this new process, we don't need to let our transaction processors know about it, because when they select that new department behind the scenes, we send an email to their inbox in finance, and they research it and create it from there. So we're actually saving another touch point in the process. So Lynette, I don't know if I've explained that clearly, but what would you add?
I think that's right on. If you log in as one of those users that it routes to because they've selected new, so whether it's the location, the job code, or the department, when that particular person logs in, the majority of what they see is just that field that they need to work from. So they'd say, oh, someone requested a new department. And then they might say, that's not a new department, it's just an existing one. And so then they have that additional field that shows up. So then they can just go in and select the department and add comments to say, oops, like, we already have this department, or they can go in and create the new department. And then before they approve the form, then they actually select what that new department is in the form. So once it tries to process into PeopleSoft and the other tables, then it is a department at that time. And hi, Karen. I was going to say hello to you earlier.
Any other?
Steve, I thought it might be interesting to show where you all started.
Oh, yeah.
Process.
Yeah, so what you're looking at here is our employee status change form, or we affectionately refer to it as the ESF. This is the second to last version that we have. This form was really ugly in 2014, so it's evolved, but we've maxed out what we could possibly do here. So I can tell you, when we first went live, in the left-hand column that you see, it's all gray there. We used to ask the submitter to fill in the current information. And then in the other column to the right, fill in what you want it changed to. Complete confusion and chaos. They didn't know where to find the current information. They weren't exactly sure what they wanted to change it to. They just know it needed to change it to something. So it was really just a lot of back and forth. And as you can see, everything is blank when you kick off. So nothing is pre-filled at all. Over time, what we did is we just kind of blanked out that left-hand column. And we're saying, listen, don't even tell us what it is now. Just tell us what you need. So it got a little bit easier, but still all starting from scratch, nothing filled out. The action reason that's being clicked on there, over time, we were able to devise it. So based on the action that you selected, when you went to the action reason, it would only list the action reasons that are appropriate for the action you selected. In the early days, it was a free-for-all. So we had people selecting actions that didn't even have reasons, and it was just very messy. Now we're at the point, which I honestly, early in the project, and Lynette and Scott, I was challenging this because I thought it was too good to be true, that we were able to dynamically code those in. So I got to tell you, that's a huge win from my perspective, because I was also responsible for rolling out our first business analytics, and we piloted with HR. Our chief human resource officer almost stopped the project about 3 weeks in and said, "There's no way we can move forward with this. Our data is too dirty." And I said, the only way to cleanse it is to kind of bring it to the light. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. So we did. We cautiously started to roll out information, and it forced people to make updates, because now they saw that that information was going to become transparent, and allowed us to do some cleanup. But it's going to be 100% better now that it's just hard coded right in. And then at the bottom of that form, Scott, if you can go down a little bit, or whoever is driving here, you'll see the other fields here. There were so many that just weren't even appropriate, and it took up room on the form. So number 23, you see here, earnings distribution. We had to list 5 or 6 lines there for that item. And now on our form, on our eForm, it's really a slide button. So nothing appears if you don't even need it. And it really just saves kind of that overwhelm factor when folks are trying to go through and make updates. We do feed to our Kronos. So we have that section now on the eForm, which is great as well. You can still leave comments down below in the eForm. And our transactional processors will review those. But we do have some transactions that can flow directly into the system without being touched. So we identify it based on the workflow that we devised on which transactions actually need to be touched and which ones could flow directly into the system. And we do perform some back-end audits, same day and next day, to make sure everything looks clean. But it's actually saving us saving us some processing horsepower by sending some of those directly in that are clean transactions, and we have strong confidence that they're accurate. And then at the very, very bottom of this form is where the submission button, and we had some rules here that we had to carry over into our workflow process. So we have here, you'll see in the red, pay rate changes. 2 signatures are required. And that rule continued. We challenged ourselves early on, do we still need that? And the business felt that that was still the right approach. So we had to figure out a way to code that in, and we were able to do it, because again, we know if there's what the action reason is going to be based on what they're inputting in the form. So when we see that the pay section is being altered, that leads us to the new workflow capability to make sure it goes to the right people. So we were able to maintain that business rule that we had. And then finally, the submit button would not work on this form unless all the proper fields were filled in. And that's something that we kind of needed as well. So when we're using the current form, really, there's certain things that need to be filled out before it allow you to submit to complete that transaction. So we have that capability as well. Thank you for bringing up that form.
Mm-hmm. That was good.
Do we have any other questions? I will say that I've been in operations in healthcare and financial services for over 30 years. I've worked with many vendors. I've worked with many consultants. And I can tell you it was a pleasure, Scott, Lynette, and your teams to work with Gideon Taylor. They were absolutely terrific, professional, extremely responsive, and obviously the product that's delivered is exceeding my expectations. So really happy to do more work with you in the future. and we'll keep you updated on some of the new features that we roll out with the new eForms.
That's awesome. Thank you, Steve. And I do have to say that, and I think that Lynette would probably echo this, you guys kept a good pace. There are some clients that that have a hard time with these projects, and they can take longer than they need to be, or longer than they need to. But one of the points on your slide was prompt decisions, and that definitely helps that makes a big difference in terms of the length of the project and how quickly we can get these kinds of solutions created with a client that's ready to move.
Yeah, absolutely. That was key. Again, I didn't grow up in healthcare. I grew up in a different industry in finance, and so coming to this industry was definitely just a shock. I had a lot to learn, but part of it was when we started a project and we made that commitment early on, we're locked and loaded, and my team gets that. So it was good to see that we all stayed on track. The only watch out for us was really the pandemic going on, because we did have some things we would have to pause and work on other emergencies, but we were able to keep focused and really happy we delivered this.
Yeah, that's awesome. And now you guys are suited to go ahead and move on and start creating your own forms for the other processes that you mentioned. I will mention, with regards to this particular solution, the ESF, the job change form, this is really complex, and we work with organizations every day trying to wrestle complex processes into simplified forms. So we're always happy to help if a client needs us to. Otherwise, if they're ready to go and they want to go ahead and tackle these things on their own, that's great. And the tool is really designed to enable that kind of flexibility, that kind of self-sufficiency, to allow organizations to create their own fluid self-service solutions for whatever business process they might have inside PeopleSoft. So if anybody is interested in learning more about GT eForms, feel free to swing by our virtual booth. We're happy to answer any questions you have. You can go ahead and email me, scott@gideontaylor.com. And then certainly, I'm sure that Steve and Lynette would also be happy to answer any questions you guys have. So thank you. That's all I got.
Very good. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a great day.